Ladies and gentlemen, good to see you again. Hello, everyone online following this conference on public service media and democracy in times of crisis. Public service media are nothing without their public, the audience, the citizens they serve. However, there is evidence that suggests the relationship, and it has been touched upon earlier, the relationship is no longer as rosy or self-evident as it used to be. If we are convinced of the importance of PSM, and we live and work by the core values we uphold, how can we convince the public it is in their interest, that they should care? Big question. But maybe we should turn the question around and ask ourselves if we offer what the public wants and needs. Do we know what they want and need and think? Do we care enough? How do we conquer hearts and minds and make the audience bond and bridge with our raison d'être, making sure that citizens are heard, to guarantee freedom of speech, to hold authorities and those in power to account, and make lived experience in all their variety accessible and understandable to all. The next session moderator will take the discussion a step further and explore, together with panelists, how to ensure a renewed commitment for PSM and a better protection of freedom of expression as the way forward. And your session moderator, I'm happy to announce, is Klaus Unterberger of the ORF from Austria. Klaus, the floor is yours.
Well, Annelies, thank you very much for the kind introduction. And actually, I'm very happy to announce some really good news, because what we will do in the next 90 minutes, we will exclusively speak about the future. And address our future, as it is said in the title of this panel. It is about the way forward. So I'm addressing all of you, all my panelists here, as part of the solution. Hopefully you can respond to that, and hoping that we may contribute some perspectives of empowerment, also in order to inspire you, the audience here, and also those who watch us online, as we would need some visions and some competence as well to face all the tremendous challenges we are facing at the moment and in the near future. And I think if I've learned something here in this conference, I'm deeply aware that there's no comfort zone left for anybody of us. So we will need empowerment, and we will need solutions for the future. So we will focus on digital transformation. We will focus on information. We will focus on contribution for democracy. What impact public service media could have. We will have some substantial expertise in the field of media regulation and media policy. But I'd like to add also some inside perspective of public service media, what actually public service media can do. So we'll intend to do some reality checking on that. So this is why I'd like to start with the youngest panelist here, and I'm connected hopefully online. I can't see him at the moment. Well, here he is. It's Patrick Grosse, and he's actually head of content of Enter, which is a social media project launched by the German Deutsche Welle. It's operating, as far as I understood, in 6 languages, and it's young, it's fresh, and it's got a great slogan saying it's time to listen to the young Europeans. So my first question to you, Patrick, would be, did you get any answers on that? What message would we hear if we would finally start listening to the young generation in Europe?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. That's actually the most important question that we in our media project all over Europe are wondering every day. Because it's most important in media that we react to the interests and the questions and the worries that young people have, in our case, young people in Europe. So I would say we would hear back from these young people 3 main keywords. For us, these main keywords are orientation, constructive approach, and trust. That's what we see in our daily work and what we can see in dialogue with these young people on our platforms and in research too. Because you all know it's hard times also for young people, crisis after crisis, war, job perspectives, inflation. So young people are looking for orientation in their life. So they want to be guided somewhat. They want to get explained what's happening in the world and how they can get through their daily life. So that's one of the most important things that we identify. The second thing that we would hear is constructive approach. The new Reuters digital news report shows that more and more young people are actually avoiding news because it's too negative for them in this time of crisis. And that's something that they want very heavily to get constructive coverage, constructive news and constructive approaches. That's also something we do in our project. And the last point, as I said, trust. We also see in the Reuters news report and also in our research that despite videos are getting shorter and people more and more want to get entertained with short videos on TikTok, for example, young people still want to be informed. But the way of consuming the news has changed a lot. But they still want the news. They even want background news. They want deep news, and they want to get it from reliable media. If we're talking now about PSM and the medias that we're presenting. They want media that they can trust, and they want journalists to be transparent, and they want journalists to know about the life of the target group. So journalists should show that they know about the daily life and the life realities of young people. So orientation, constructive, and trust are our main answers to that, or what we hear from the young people.
Thank you very much, Patrick. We certainly put that on the list. However, I'd like to ask you to explain a little bit more about your project. What are you really up to, and how it might affect and even inspire public service media?
Yes, the Enter project. As you said, I'm head of content of the Enter project, which is a pan-European project. We're operating only on social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and also TikTok now. We are addressing young people all over Europe. We produce content in 6 languages and now on 21 social media platforms. And we collaborate with our different teams in different countries on a daily basis, which makes the project really pan-European. Our topics cover current debates, worries, but also all the interests that young people in Europe have. And the project is co-funded by the European Commission. So what we actually try to do is that we created this project as Deutsche Welle, the German international broadcaster, together with the French international broadcaster France Médias Monde. And we assembled public media in Europe, but also private media in Europe to build up this project. And we actually oriented ourselves along the 3 points that I said in the beginning. So our question was, what can be our contribution to media in Europe? And our contribution for young people especially would be to give them orientation in these different times of this information crisis, etc. And with our constructive stories, we want to show the diversity of Europe. That's what our initial purpose was, and build up trust to public media with this kind of project by following the users where they are on social media and contributing trustworthy news to them. And that's actually something we learn every day in our project, how we can do this and how we can get better in this.
And we certainly come back to you, but I'd like to use you for some inspiration for the next minutes here on the panel, because we will start talking about media regulation and media policy. So seen from a young game changer, I consider you to be one. What would your expectations be when it comes to media policy and media regulation in Europe?
When it comes to media regulation in Europe, I would say I'm not to judge how deep regulation should go. I would say from an editorial perspective, I think public media and the regulation on public media should make it possible for public media to always reinvent itself. So it should definitely always be agile, flexible structures. The regulating, the controlling should be sufficient, but not too heavy, of course. because we always have to react to where the users are and what the users want. And public media has to move this way to stay relevant, because otherwise it will not be able to follow the trends and the direction of the society, especially the young people. The second thing is, and that's again very editorially speaking, we should break up a bit the structures and should open up not only to other media, for example, also private media, but also to influencers, so to young people that know what the trends are, what the young people in Europe want. And we should collaborate more, even more. That's here when I talking to a panel for the EBU. That's very important to say. We should even collaborate more and make that possible in our structures and also in how we regulate them. So reinvention, young creators, opening up, and I'm the best example for that, letting young people that are in the target audience be the editors or the content makers, content creators for the young content.
Well, message understood, opening up and collaboration, I think we can deal with that. But when it comes to media regulation and media policy, we've got one expert here, and she might bring some news, and I'm speaking about Heike Raab. She's Secretary of State of the German Rhineland-Palatinate. And Heike, I'm referring to the Media State Treaty here, which is actually an amendment to the existing one. However, it's a new one. Can you give us some information? What's new? What are the changes? And what are considered to be the impact, specifically also for public service media?
Thank you, and hello by my side. And I will fulfill what Patrick said. So our decision was, and what Tim said, Tim Davey. So the content must be interesting enough for all people, and deliberation of content must receive all people, the young and the elder ones, one who live in the northern part of Europe or in the southern part, and that's similar in Germany. And we know that the digital usage will replace linear usage, and if we consider the youngsters, so it has had replaced the digital usage for the youngsters is digital and not linear. And we made one experience in the public service media system in Germany in 2015, when we stopped 2 channels, one of the ARD and one of the ZDF, and we established Funk. It's only online. It's an only online service only for youngsters, not the children, but the one in between, the young adults. And it is like a laboratory for public media service, and it works very well, only online content delivering. And so later on, last year, we said, and we talked about that topic since 3 or 4 years. I'm in that position since 7 years, nearly 4 years. What can we do with the public broadcasters in Germany? So we recognized that the audience is getting older and older, and so we said we need more delivering content in the online versions, but we need a changement in the framework, and that's what we try to do with the third amendment of the Media Treaty now. We there is the remit of the PSM, and we focused the remit of the public broadcasters. We said what I pointed out before, deliver content to younger and elder people with migration background or without migration background. So we have a diverse society as well, and public broadcasters should deliver also diverse content. And what we did also is flexibilization of the remit as well. So they can change from linear broadcasting to a digital offer at the platforms.
If I understand correctly, that means giving more flexibilities, more opportunities to public service media. And if I understand the text of the treaty correctly, then you're very much inspired from the European challenges, not to speak of global challenges. Do you have a European horizon in the meaning of what you're doing politically? Because why should we care, sitting here in Vilnius, about a German media state treaty, or could we even learn something from it?
Yes, we have to learn that findability is quite important. The content of the public media services have to be found. And it is so complicated. So in Germany, for example, we have the ARD, we have the ZDF, we have several channels, we have several radio programs, we have 100 applications, apps. It's too much. So we need a strategy for a common platform. We need it in Germany and hopefully in Europe as well.
Do I understand correctly that is also to inspire public service media to move on in the digital world?
Yes, they have to inspire, and I refer what Tim Davies said. He said the PSM must be loved and used by the majority of people, and this is a wonderful sentence. And if it is loved and used, so it must be delivered all over several platforms. But we are using as only US-American platforms and not a European one. And I think if we want to view how we could move on in the future time, so we could move together and common in the future time.
Well, that's definitely good news for the community of public service media. However, I'd like to add some critical note on that as well, being a journalist, so I'm allowed to pose some nasty questions as well. And when it comes to impact, I dare to take that personally. I'm working for public service media now for 40 years, can you imagine? And I had a good life, being a reporter, producer, journalist, so high blood pressure, creative life, that's perfect. But when entering the world of public value, of media policy, I had almost all the time to protect and to defend and to legitimate. I think I had about a billion pages to write when it comes to the ex-ante test, to the public value test. And that's even worse. The deeper the crisis in society is, the more obligations we receive from the world of policy. But before we start working, we should start legitimating us. So is there any hope with the clear remit of public service media that public service media is not just here to legitimate, but also a driver of change in the future?
Hopefully it is, but public media services are under pressure at the moment, and we heard it the whole day. They are under pressure by the non-democratic parties, the right-wing parties, and I think they are a basis for democratic systems. And so we have to fight for public media services, but we have to reform them as well. So we have both challenges and we have to find solutions.
Okay, so both sides are obviously working, and being in control of the quality assurance system of my company, I do not hesitate to legitimate, but nevertheless sometimes it's a very heavy burden upon a shrinking community. However, when it comes to regulation, we've got another expert here. I'm hopefully connected to Renate Nicolai. Yeah, can we see her? Hello, can you hear us? Yes, she can. Okay, well, Renate Nicolai is the head of Vice President Vera Jourova's cabinet, and Jourova's cabinet. So, and you are definitely bringing us some news from the dimension of European regulation. It's got a name. It's called EMFA, the Media Freedom Act. Could you tell us that the EMFA, obviously being one of the most far-reaching instruments of regulation, could it really become a game changer?
Certainly. First of all, thank you very much for having me, and greetings to lovely Vilnius. Certainly, our intention with the European Media Freedom Act is to make a difference for media in Europe in general. So not specifically only public service media, but media in general in Europe. Because we have seen over the last couple of years rather worrying trends about media pluralism and media freedom in Europe when it comes to political interference, lack of transparency, editorial freedom, state aid and financing structures. So we saw different aspects in this context that we wanted to address in a horizontal legislation. This is done for the first time. We are kind of not regulating the media. Our intention is rather to create an environment in the European Union that will make it easier for media operators, be they private or public service media, to flourish and to develop either nationally or even cross-border. And of course, we are addressing in this new law also the public service media, being very well aware of the limited competences that we have for this specific media. But our idea is actually to protect public service media, because we are very much driven also in our work on the Media Freedom Act by the belief that public service media as a trustworthy medium in our digital reality is worth supporting, financially, is worth supporting also in the governing structures. And that's what we are trying to address with the Media Freedom Act.
That's certainly good news and good intentions for the Media Freedom Act. And I think the community of public service media is quite happy when reading safeguarding independence and safeguarding also sustainable and sufficient funding for public service media. However, what if states do not deliver? And I don't need much fantasy here. So will it be just a friendly reminder, some sort of a paper tiger, or would it be effective actually in supporting public service media?
It would certainly not only be a paper tiger if ever we come to the adoption of the Media Freedom Act in Europe, which I thoroughly hope we will, because we would for the first time have enshrined in European law a certain safety net at the European level. Many member states have good structures, but there are, situations in some member states that could improve. And with the Media Freedom Act, we would have a tool to actually address this with member states. I think this is one of the intentions to have also in our regular dialogue that we will continue to have with member states, whether it's in the Rule of Law report, which has an important chapter on media pluralism and media freedom, that we would have a possibility to address shortcomings, because we would have a standard of a safety net at the European level. And eventually, if everything really, really fails, one could imagine also, but this is not our primary goal, that a real dilemma could be brought to the attention of the European Court of Justice in an infringement procedure, so that we could get clarity from the European Court of Justice. So that is a rather drastic sword that we would have at our disposal if we had European legislation in this area.
So obviously it is about checks and balances, like in the journalistic world. And we learn from the text of the Media Freedom Act that there will be a new board founded. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How would that work?
Yes, the European Media Board that we have suggested is actually a rather, natural development out of something that already exists in the function of ERGA, which is the system of the independent media authorities in the member states. And they would be, in our view, the club that would kind of deal with the situation on media pluralism and media freedom in the European Union. This is more targeted towards kind of potential situations that we might see from member states if there were, and unfortunately we have seen that in some member states, for instance, laws with a protectionist objective to, pull out certain foreign media operators from their territory, or, situations where a member state stops financing certain media or has an intransparent system of state advertising, then the board could kind of come up with non-binding opinions. However, let me stress one point that is very important. That board would deal with media pluralism, but it would not deal with the public service media, which is linked to the Amsterdam Treaty and the competence structure that we have in the European Union. But in the broader sense of potential developments, worrying developments, in member states, the board would have an important function of peer pressure, putting peer pressure with the non-binding opinions on member states that we could then also pick up in the dialogue with the member states.
But if I understand correctly, this is a procedure to opening up. The board will or can invite also other media experts from civil society as well.
Yes, I mean, the board, I mean, what we are saying in the draft law that we have adopted is very general. And of course, you know, the board will have the possibility to kind of, you know, give itself guidelines, how it operates. So we are not too prescriptive on that. But of course, one kind of big opportunity for the board would also to be engaged with other stakeholders to have the best knowledge possible. They will already have a lot of expertise themselves, but they should not be a closed shop. They should definitely engage in a dialogue also with others.
So thank you very much. Obviously, this is up to reality. Speaking of which, I'm asking Urška Umek, she's head of the media unit of the Information Society Department of the Council of Europe. Welcome also to Vilnius. Let's stick a little bit to checks and balances and to the board. Also critical questions. As far as I understand, this is a board of regulators in first place. What happens if regulators misbehave? I mean, I'm just thinking of the comments of my distinguished colleague Rotsgoni when talking about a very critical point. What happens if you know, some regulators do have friendship with government? Can we really trust that this new board will be an effective checks and balances and evaluation of the contents of the Media Freedom Act?
Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for this very challenging question on two counts, because it is challenging in its own, but it is also challenging for me, representing another international organization, to speak about a proposal that comes from the European Union. So perhaps what I have retained so far from the discussions on the future Media Freedom Act, one thing that I can say, and here I can echo what Christina was saying in the second panel, is that indeed there are problems with independence of regulators also in some of the European Union states. In fact, that has been confirmed on a number of occasions by, for example, the Council of Europe Venice Commission opinions. So this is our body for democracy through law, and it assesses constitutional provisions and also sometimes media law provisions in individual countries, individual member states of the Council of Europe. They have done assessments, for example, on Hungary and also Poland, and have found that the checks and balances were simply not sufficient. So we have got, with what is suggested in the EMFA, we have got sort of perhaps a super regulator in the making, but there are two levels of dependency here that are possible and that could happen. One is the state dependency, state level dependency. So we can have regulators that, not only because laws would not be sufficient or appropriate, but simply because out of loyalty, out of allegiance to their governments, might not be independent. But then, of course, when we move the board to the European level, of course, the board will collaborate very closely with the European Commission. And there, I think that there is potential for another level of dependencies. Now, I don't know exactly how we can resolve this. What I do know, of course, is that if the standards of independence, of how the regulators are appointed, how they can be dismissed, under what conditions, and also what sort of qualifications are needed for the members of regulators, that already resolves a lot of it. But of course, not all of it, because as we've heard, one level is legislation, and then of course it is the implementation. So I will refer back to the Council of Europe standards. We do also have a recommendation on independence of regulatory authorities dating back to 2000. It is on broadcasting regulatory authorities. However, I think that the principles can also apply to convergent regulators, if only, of course, these standards are being implemented.
But obviously, nobody really is expecting Council of Europe to deliver a perfect world to us. So obviously, there's a lot of work to do also on national level, referring to democracy, transparency. But obviously, the standards of Council of Europe did help to set the framework appropriately for the future. I think this is the potential of the Media Freedom Act. One question maybe, what would be the future potential of this framework of regulation?
I think that we are at a point when something simply needs to be done and something needs to be reinforced. There are already standards in place. However, we are facing a process of digital transformation, and certain standards simply need to be adapted, adjusted to the new reality. So I think that, you know, we don't even have to speak about what we expect from these standards. We expect them to somehow better fit the reality in which we find ourselves, but maybe through the standards and processes are right now not equipped to face it. I would hope, of course, that in the future with the frameworks, both at the level of the European Union and the Council of Europe, we might be better able to do that. I mean, at the Council of Europe level, we have adopted, I think Manuel and Maria have evoked it, a recommendation on principles for media and communication governance just this year, where we've tried to sort of provide a very comprehensive framework for everything that should happen at the state level in media governance. What states should be doing, but also what regulators should be doing, what self-regulatory bodies should be doing. So I think that we see emerging the frameworks, but again, you know, at the end, it is a question of how and how forcefully they will be implemented.
Well, I'd like to add another critical question when opening up the horizon of media regulation in Europe. My question would be, isn't there an elephant in the room, also in this debate, or even some tigers when referring to the digital giants? Because these are the major disruptions we see on a global scale. And I imagine somehow a situation where Mark Zuckerberg is meeting the incredible Musk or Peter Thiel, and they are sitting in San Francisco having a good time and laughing about those Europeans. They are kept busy by regulating each other. So how might European regulation really affect these, as I call, tigers, in order to protect us?
Yes, well, perhaps because this is a bigger question than only the media. So maybe I will try to answer it in the context of the giants' relationship with the media. And here, of course, we do have to acknowledge that, first of all, what they do is, I think that they have at least a twofold function. They are gatekeepers to the media, meaning that they're the distributors and they effectively, a lot of the time, decide what we will be able to see, hear, view. And then, on the other hand, of course, as we have also heard today, they have been much more able to monetize media content than the media themselves. They have these quite advanced data-driven marketing strategies that simply work better for them because they have better access to audience data than the media that is basic whose audience we're talking about do. So for us, for example, it was important in the context of promoting quality journalism, for example, to address also this issue of giants and their relationship to the media. And we think coming, from the perspective of a European, pan-European organization, we do believe that the first thing is to embed the rules in the rule of law scope. So there need to be some sort of regulatory frameworks to set the obligations for both media but also platforms. Now also the recommendation on media and communication principles actually addresses both media and platforms. But if we just go, and you allow me 4 more words, there are a few things that could be done. First of all, of course, would be better brand attribution, so meaning that we would know whose content we're actually seeing or listening or reading, and we would know who has the editorial responsibility. Second thing, data sharing, also something that we need to think about. Then better transparency of ads on platforms, and then we could think about redistribution mechanisms as well.
Well, I learned here that there are some visions why the digital giants actually should worry about European regulation, and that's good news for me as well. Yeah, but I'm relating now to the real reality of media production when coming to public service media in action. And before we talk here with our distinguished representatives of public service media, I'd like to show you a small video, and it's about a project called European Perspectives, and it's a project from European Broadcasting Union, very much inspiring and focusing on the digital transformation, and hopefully we're going to see in a few minutes what is already in place. Okay.
Together, public service media make up Europe's largest newsroom. They invest 5.5 billion euros a year and employ more than 40,000 journalists to deliver independent, trusted news every second of every day. And now, they're driving a unique editorial and technical collaboration, a European perspective, harnessing the scale and power of EBU members. A European perspective brings online audiences the best journalism in their own languages. Together, we're throwing light on the issues affecting all European citizens and putting our own journalism into perspective by seeing how those issues are reported elsewhere. In a world of information overload and language barriers, each editor recommends their best stories to their counterparts in other countries. This is made possible by a state-of-the-art software platform using the latest machine learning. It's powered by Peach, the EBU's personalization and recommendation system, and Eurovox for transcribing, translating, revoicing, and subtitling multilingual content. Text, video, and audio news, all translated into several different languages. A European perspective is embedded directly into members' own websites. It will enable us to build a culture of mutual understanding, helping to inform the public by guiding them to trusted news sources and countering disinformation. By innovating together at EBU Brussels, we can create a truly European perspective.
So, future has already started within public service media, and I think this is always a good hint and an answer to the question we've been posing at the beginning of the panel when speaking about collaboration. So this is the dimension when public service media is able to collaborate. When it comes to innovation, I might introduce our next panelist because it's home territory for Jean-Paul Philippot, because he's been president for ABU for quite a while. Now he's Director General of RTBF, the Belgian public service media for the French-speaking communities. Jean-Paul, I know that your company right now is in the process of delivering and developing a new strategy, accelerating digital transformation, as it says. And when I read correctly, RTBF is meant to be a creator of experience, and more than that, it should dare to take risks. Now that's a good one. Finally, we found somebody taking risks. What risks are you taking? Are you the Crocodile Dundee of public service media?
Certainly not.
Okay, why not? That would be a good role.
No. But I think that risk and innovation it's part of our roots. But maybe before we talk about the how we transform, it's important to come back a few moments to why we transform. Because, first of all, universality is part of our DNA. And from the early beginning, 100 years ago, our remit was and is to reach everyone without border and restriction. And in the past, we always had the technical opportunity to do that. Frequencies allocation from radio and TV must carry for the cable. And when we move in the digital world, we don't have anything to secure that. We have to guarantee the access and the fiability by ourselves because the techniques and the lack of regulation. And the second reason why we have to change is the democracy. As Delphine Ernotte said this morning in the introduction speech, there is a strong relationship between democracy and trustful, pluralist public media. I will tell you stories. We have an election, a European election, in 2 years. In Belgium, 17% of the voters will vote for the first time. 17%. They can change everything in the results. Or they will be informed, or they will take their decisions through apps, through social networks. And we know that in social networks and apps, there is no control, no regulation of information, Facebook, propaganda, and so on. For these two reasons, universality and capacity to take the key information for everyone, the youngest and the oldest, to do them active citizens, we need to change. And it's really important, from my perspective, to strongly link the why and the how. Everything has to change in our organization. I will describe why and how. Because nothing to change in the remit. And it's important to connect the vision, the mission with the strategy. Because everyone in the organization has to be convinced. Everyone in the organization will be ambassador, will be part of the change. And so when we go in the strategy of the new strategy, we can discuss during days, but I will underline 6 topics. First of all, we have to change the model. And we move in our organization from a historical model based on technology, a director of radio, a director of TV, which is no sense now. In an organization focused on 2 pillars, the audience and the content. And we address the audience through different platforms, radio, TV, web apps, third party. And we produce content for everyone in every kind of formats. Deeply change. 80% of the management positions have to change. We don't fire them. We change deeply the job description. 80%. That means that all the organization has to be reshaped. And the budget has to be reoriented. We move the budget to invest more for young audience. We invest more today, more or less a third of all the budget for young audience. It was less than 10% 5 years ago. Second topics, the content, obviously. As Tim said this morning, we have to be creative, but we have skills. We were really experimented to produce linear content. We have leveraged these skills to be innovative in the digital world. But we have also to learn what means interactivity, which is not part of our core business. We never know, we never be in contact with the audience. And now the audience came in the studios. So we have to be completely new in our approach in that way. Third things, we have to learn what means marketing, which is a horrible world in the PSM historical mindset. But it's part of our reality. We were in a way in which we produce one content for many. And now we have to produce many one-to-one content. That means that we have to know better and deeper what's the audience, what's the needs, what's the way she uses, what's the habit. We have to collect data. We have to deal with new tools for that. Fourth topics is the distribution. You say we have a lot of platforms and so on. First of all, we have to develop our own platforms and our own apps. The battlefield today is this stupid little screen in which we have several apps. We have to be in the first screen of each smartphone of the audience. That's the new battlefield. Completely new for us. And we struggle with giants. They have 100,000 of people. They have billion and billion. And we have to provide the same experience for the user. That's challenging, and we will come back in the solution. We have to cooperate strongly to achieve this goal. Fifth, leverage. We have to be more efficient because we will not receive more from the government or from the citizens. So we have to save to invest. We have to invest in a new media factory. And we have the chance to have new tools, new process, new device. We can produce faster. We can produce easier than before. So we have to invest. And it's horrible for us. Change the model, invest in new tools, invest in new content, and finally, recruit new skills. Recruit new skills because there are new jobs, a data analyst. What we deal with that in a newsroom before. But it's core now to have data analysts, artificial intelligence people. So in my company now, we recruit 50% of new incomers in new position and new job. That means that we have to be attractive for them, and we have to create the place. So create efficiency, reduce the staff in the core business to have place enough to recruit new people. So organization, tools, platforms, skills, and innovative content.
Thank you very much for telling the core elements of your strategy. Now I know about what risk you're taking. So, however, I'd like to add some critical question as well, and it's about collaboration and collaborating with the giants. Some of us criticize that we are just feeding, we as public service media, quality journalism, that we finally end up feeding the giants, yeah, by proliferating and giving them the content, and so therefore to make them even bigger. So I understand completely why we need, you know, Google and YouTube and all the other giants for reaching out to the younger audiences. But isn't it also time for an own European platform? I mean, to open up to a vision for a public service media internet platform in order based on the media, on the things we already do?
Oh, sensitive questions. If we don't want to be content provider, we need direct, personalized connection with everyone. That means that we have to develop our own platforms with our own single sign-on. We deal with our own data. It's the only way, due to the lack of regulation. And I want to respond to what you say. Every authoritarian government regulates giants. Every, from Turkey to Russia to China, every. So it's not a question of technical capacity. I think it's only willingness. It's a bit cruel, but I don't understand why we cannot regulate the giant in some areas. If you take the example of Coca-Cola, I think it's the most secretive formula in the world. But when I buy a bottle of Coca, I can read what is good and bad for my health. They are obliged. The algorithm of Google or Facebook, it's a black box. We don't know anything. We don't know the name. We don't know what's behind. As you said, Mark Zuckerberg can decide tomorrow that no more content from RTBF will be available. Okay, no controls. So, to come back, so we have a direct access. We have to deal with the data, but we have to be pragmatic also.
But Jean-Paul, what can we do as the community of public service media? We can complain about lags in regulation, we complain about Mark Zuckerberg and the incredible Musk or whatever, but what can actually we do in order to reach out for the young audiences? I mean, their own video of European perspective is obviously the way forward.
Sure. But the European perspective is a really, really, really brilliant idea and project. What is important, it's the introduction of the video. We have the money, we have the people, we have the content. So the links between that and the audience is the platforms. And to be honest, we never succeed to develop a pan-European platforms. Never. Because when we talk with public broadcaster, you cannot talk about merging. You can not and never talk about one by the other one. And so it's always mutual collaboration, the willingness of every members. And there is always someone we think that is stronger alone or with another standard and so on. It's a pity. It's a pity. But I think that it's not the end of the game. There are several initiatives. This is one of them, and maybe we cannot embrace all at the first, but we can go step by step, work with colleagues who want to work together, because there is another reality. We don't have enough capacity, skills, and money to develop and maintain platform which bring the same experience than the giants. So we have to work together.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this much for collaboration. However, hopefully public service media will have the energy for the big picture, for the vision. After all, it's a multi-billion enterprise we're having here. We are having a big infrastructure throughout Europe, and actually the vision is to use it, so therefore, hopefully, the vision will be upright. We are getting closer in terms of real reality, closer. I mean, we landed safe and sound now in Lithuania. Here is Monica. Here comes the challenge. Garbačiauskaitė Budrienė. Did I spell that out correctly?
Well done.
Okay. She's Director General of LRT, and transformation, as far as I understand, is your daily business. Can you give us a little bit of insight what you are up to right now?
So hello everybody, and
referring to what Jean-Paul Philippot just said, we are also, well, today our supervisory board confirmed our new strategy for upcoming 5 years. And you are, in fact, you will be the first ones to learn about it. And I can briefly tell what it is in it. And it is very much related to what Jean-Paul spoke about. And I'm also glad that we were able to use the knowledge and skills of other EBU members in this strategy. Also, referring to what Tim Davies said, we will be really eager to reaching out the audiences that were slightly abandoned or we didn't reach before. So our vision is to become an integral part of every Lithuanian citizen life. And I think it's going to be a big challenge because it's not so easy, because it is in the terms of public service media. Usually it is supposed to be like upscale content for well-educated people with less humorous shows, less entertainment, and so on and so forth. So this is going to be a challenge. But however, we love challenges. We've been doing it for past four years, transforming the organization. And what else? What will be important in reaching these audiences? We have several specific tasks. So one of them is, of course, young audiences. We have to provide good services for them, or otherwise they will seek it in different and not so very quality places. And in a rather small country as Lithuania is, the offer is not very good. So we must really cope with this. The other thing is that we need to reconnect with the regions. To reach everybody, not only the big cities, not only Vilnius, but to engage people in the regions. And in fact, we've been already doing it for some time, because we observed that after COVID, people became really anxious, society became fragmented, riots started, critics towards, as they say, mainstream media, including public service media started. So we really need to be closer to them. We did a lot of this in this summer, and it really worked. We are glad about it, and we will go on with this. So this is very important. Also, what's been said here and mentioned a lot is the formats. It's like how you reach these audiences is, of course, it is very clear that the phone that was shown today is the further the more source of news and other content. So for us, one of the most emphasis in our new strategy is that we will have to turn our news website into the main platform of LRT. And we will have to put more efforts in bringing content to our audiences whenever they are. And so, yeah, this raises a question also about the platforms, whether whether we have to be in YouTube, in Spotify, and in other platforms. But yeah, we do believe that. It's hard to fight these giants. It's better for us. It is important that they consume the content of LRT in the platforms that they are used to, and it's important the content itself, and that they realize that it is LRT's content. So this is these are important emphasis of our new strategy. That will be really challenging to fulfill, because we still have these linear channels. We have elderly audience that are used to the things that they were like. They have a habit, so we have to fulfill their expectations as well. So the hardest part about strategy is decide of what not to do. And yeah, and we will, and of course data analysis and communication. We realize that it's regarding communication, it's very important to get out of the public service media bubble to reach the audiences where they are, to learn why not they are consuming your content. And the data analysis department was also expanded recently.
Yeah, something keeps you busy, obviously. So good luck for all the duties you've been telling us. I know that you're also a member of the executive board of the EBU. So coming back to the question of Patrick Grosse at the beginning, how important is for you sitting here in Lithuania the option, the potential of European collaboration within the family of the European Broadcasting Union? I mean, it's an old institution, but it's an institution within Europe. Yeah, some other people, maybe in the United States, would envy about that. How could you actually use EBU for your own benefit?
It is old institution, but it's incredibly flexible and quality and quick institution, I would say, as being so big, and we've got a lot of knowledge and a lot of skills and useful things and researches and data that we use in our daily operations, and that a lot of ideas from other members that we implement. And I also hope that me being in Expo, that we bring a different perspective to Europe, to family, to understanding on how Baltic region is operating, how this part of Europe is operating, at what they, how we think and what is important for us. And overall, EBU as an organization is important for small countries with young democracies, as in Lithuania, because in the times of crisis, and if there is a pressure from politicians, EBU stepping in means a lot. Because they help. Also, what is important in EBU, for young democracies, that EBU also gives an understanding of certain standards, how public service media should operate, how it should be governed, and so on. And also, what I didn't mention before, speaking about our new strategy, what is important is the quality of content, of course, which is like a hygiene thing, but high journalism standards. We are about to finish Trust Journalism Initiative, which EBU is also one of the initiators in setting the procedures and higher standards for our journalists and having this international certificate. So I hope that would also contribute to our quality content and the trust, which is the most important thing.
And standards, by the way, as you mentioned, it is the key word for our last panelist here today. It's Timo Huovinen. He's Chief of Journalistic Standards and Ethics. That sounds a little bit godlike, yeah? So, Timo, what are you actually doing in your work back home in Finland? And do we really need some new standards when it comes to digital communication? I'm referring here obviously to social media.
Yes, hello. Despite of my title, I feel, and I'm a journalist, and I've been journalist something like 30 years, not 40 years like you, Klaus, but
that's obvious.
Yeah, but knowing those guidelines and laws that enables to do you braver journalism, not inhibit to do that way. And in Finland, we got that kind of system that I'm not between the ordinary viewer or listener or watcher to whom we are doing our job, but I'm try to help the journalist before the publishing to do their job in the proper way and do the journalism braver way. And we have been talking about laws here and guidelines, and like I said, knowing those laws and guidelines, you can do a braver journalism.
Okay, but also critical question to you: what are you doing in case of misbehaving? Because I know that because I'm always a member of the board of ethics back home at Austrian Broadcasting Corporation, and I know for sure you can't always be the good guy. You're praising our glory. There is misbehaving. So therefore, what actually are you doing? Do you have a Finnish police cap on, or how can we imagine your job?
Doing a mistake, it's a human thing to do, and it's human that you somehow you try to cover if you are doing a mistake. But according to journalistic rules, guidance of journalists, if you have done a mistake which is big enough, you have to raise your hand and do like on basketball, that you admit that you have make a mistake. And I try to help the journalist to follow the guidelines of journalists and admitting to if they have done a mistake. And that's one part of my job. But first of all, I would like to do my job that way, that I will help the journalist not to do the mistakes, for instance.
Okay, but
before the publishing.
But after all, could you actually recommend other public service media to have a job like you? I mean, is it really having an impact?
It is. I only make wishes to the journalists and to the news desks, because if I would say that you have to do this and this way, then I would go over the line that it's over the line of journalistic independence. But if I say something and wish something, they 80-90% they follow my wishes.
However, we should not forget that accountability is one of the core values of public service media throughout Europe, and accountability is about checks and balances. So therefore, we appreciate very much this kind of distinctive quality of public service media. And we should not forget, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm here correct, but other commercial media don't have this kind of quality assurance and ethical standards and checks and balances. But obviously, there is still a lot of work to do when it comes to check on our own accountability in quality journalism. Now,
just saying that they have this kind of system also, but it's named the other way. So at least they try, commercial media, they try to do this way also. And sometimes they succeed and sometimes they don't. So they have this ombudsman system also.
Okay. Not in all countries, but we learn in Finland they do. Yeah, so hopefully it is a role model for whole Europe. Patrick, is he still online? You have listened now to some very intensive and extensive statements here. Do you have any kind of reflection? Did we forget something? What's your feedback on the statements here?
Yes, I listened carefully because I heard many very positive signals when it comes to the development of public service media, especially by reaching young audiences. I think one of the important aspects that we heard was the keyword of flexibility, which is connected to our audiences, because we always say, especially in social media, content is king. But I would say also audience is king. So we always do what the audience expects from us, what the interests are and what they want. hear and see. So we should always keep in mind, I'm always talking for younger audience, but of course, public service media has a lot of elderly audience. So we should go in a system that's a bit more in parallel. So we should, of course, keep the linear system somewhat for the people that need it or want it. But in the meanwhile, in parallel, we need to have the digital change in our companies, which means, for example, having media labs, working on formats, working on reaching out to young audiences. So we should be in parallel and try to reach as many different audiences as possible with our resources. And of course, the second point, which was mentioned, very important, we have to adapt, and that's what I meant in the beginning with reinventing. We have to change our structures. So we have to adapt the standards to the digital world, because we are more or less moving 100% into it in the future, in the next decades. And make it possible when it comes to regulation. Also a very important point. I'm not an expert in that, but my important takeaway from that is we should always try also with regulation to make it possible for journalists to portray the life realities of the people. Because as I said, audience is king, and people should recognize that journalists are close to the life reality of the audience, because then you also are seen as a trustworthy media. And that's why we need regulations in countries where media freedom is, for example, threatened in some way, to let journalists be close to the audience. And last but not least, we should always, and I'm saying that again, we should always see ourselves and the structures that we're having as digital change driver. People in my company come to us and say, we want to learn from you. We want to work also for some days in your editorial team, because our project Enter really is already a digital change driver for the people and the companies involved. And it shows that it works, that people are interested, young people in Europe. So we have 65 million views since the start of the project last year. We have a new TikTok channel, which is working very well for 4 weeks already. And we will build up the project for our next phase next year with new languages, and also strengthening the work together with influencers. So we actually see success, and we see that people want to be informed in this way, and that we reinvent ourselves to these conditions. And one last point, if you allow me, one last point is it's very valuable to have the EBU and other pan-European cooperation systems. I think this is very key to also build up a pan-European public sphere in some way. I personally, from my experience from our project, would not say that it would be useful to merge, for example, PSMs in Europe, because our understanding is every nation is still different and people have different life realities and different interests. So that's actually what we do, to work together as PSM, but also with private media in our project, because journalists on the ground are the best to know what people's worries and interests are.
So thank you very much. I learned there is hope. Thank you very much for this empowerment. And I'm fully aware that we got some questions from the online community. Nicola, can you tell us?
Yes, I will. So yeah, I have one question with reference to the European Media Freedom Act, and in particular to the provisions in Article 5, which talk about public service media. And the question is, can somebody react to the open hostility of the publishers regarding the guarantees for public service media of funding, regarding to funding? So is there any reaction to this question?
Well, very good question. Heike Raab, you're addressing. Renate wants to answer on that. Didn't see it, very small. Renate, your answer, please.
Yes, I can come in on that. I think we have actually in the very early stage that we are in on the European Media Freedom Act, which is, as I said, an innovative kind of new thing. We have never dared so far in Europe to come with such a horizontal kind of approach. And there are kind of, yes, indeed, two articles that are debated a lot, and that is the Article 5, which is about, the media operators themselves, and the Article 6. Article 5 is about the public service media, and Article 6 is about the kind of media operators and what we expect them to do. And on the Article 5, I think the there isn't so much criticism from the publishers against that. I think actually, I think I know the debate quite well. I think the publishers are more worried about what we have put in Article 6 in our Media Freedom Act, which is really about helping media operators to kind of in order to ensure that they are modern and flexible and ensuring good quality journalistic work, that they are dealing in a way that they deem necessary with issues such as conflict of interest, and we heard just the standards by the Finnish colleague, and we heard just also from the Lithuanian colleague that there are kind of examples like the trusted journalistic initiative that are being built into systems. So with this Article 6, we have developed an idea in the law that we have kind of concretized in the recommendation that comes along with our act, what could be these kind of policies to be pursued by also publishing houses, so that you don't have conflict of interest. I think the criticism of the publishers is less about the public service media. I think that's really more a discussion about the public service media and the Article 5, about whether that is compatible with the competences as in the treaty, combined with the Amsterdam Protocol. I think that's more the debate. I mean, that's at least what I can report from the rather intense discussions that we have since we have adopted the law with the stakeholders and also with the two institutions, the court, legislatures, the Council and the European Parliament.
Thank you very much. Heike, do you want to give some comment from the real reality of media policy?
Yes, sure. I would like to do it. I think we all have the same common goal in Europe. So to protect or safeguarding freedom of media and democracy. But we have a quite different situation in Europe. You pointed it out in your comments. And so what we are thinking in Germany, our question is, does it fit if we say one size fits it all? And we have in Germany a very complicated media regulation system, decentral, federalized, with some self-controlling systems, with supervision boards or control boards in each public broadcaster channel. And this doesn't exist in Hungary or in other states. And so we, please understand us in Germany, we like to save this high self-guarding level in media controlling and media regulation what we have. And so, but I'm so grateful and thankful that Renate and Vera Jourova, we have such an early opportunity to talk together. And what Patrick says, we need interaction with the audience, we need interaction with the member states and with a lot of shareholders, and so participation is so and a constructive participation. That what we try to do at the moment. We are at the early beginning of legislative progress, and we in Germany we made a lot of things what you pointed out. So we have the media treaty, so we have non-discrimination, transparency, we have public value regulation in our media treaty. When we transformed the AYMS directive into national law, and not all 27 member states have transformed the AYMS directive, and we need a coherent system, a legal system, and we try to be a constructive part in this dialogue, in this legislative process.
You. There is another question. Nicola?
Yes, there's another question, and then this is a question which refers to what Jean-Paul explained with regard to innovation and the new strategy. And the question is, are public service media really up to this big shift and change? And maybe it's a question which could be addressed to both of you, Monica and Jean-Paul, because what you described is really a big shift. So are they really ready to do so?
I think they are, and we are already observing successful examples in Europe. Take Scandinavia. All of them are already working in this way, and it has been there for 10 years or so, the structure that Jean-Paul just mentioned. But of course, it is not easy because it requires the change of organization culture. And it requires making TV people to realize that web is the gate now. That if what you produce is not in the web, so it's not there actually. So it is not an easy thing, and of course the TV production is still expensive. So you must understand, must invest there, and it's not, still have linear channels. And also these developing digital products, platforms are so much better in it, and they have so much money and such a big experience in doing this. So we really need to catch up, because as it was mentioned before, we really have a knowledge in linear production and in big screen production. But being agile, being innovative, for us it's, I think, still a challenge. But we love challenges though. So.
If you think about the values of the public service media, is it on the change? The answer is no, because we have done our job through the values since 100 years. But if you think about the platforms where we publish our content, yes, we are in a big change, and we have been. There is television and radio. They are, and I will say this with a great respect, because I have started my career on the TV. They are old-fashioned platforms. Internet and social media are the thing. Has been and will be the thing.
Jean-Paul, your answer to the question would be?
It's obvious.
Are you ready to go to fulfill your own strategy?
It's ongoing. Yeah. It's already done in part of it. And what I would say, it's a moment of opportunity. It's a moment for the public broadcaster to be better, to bring more value for the society. It's not a moment in which we have to shrink. We are not in a corner. In the majority of the country in Europe, we are the most trustful source of information. So we have a lot of leverage. But in the other hand, I give you an image. In my company, the average age of the staff is 46. We compete against platforms in which the average age is less than 30. That means that we want to win the World Cup with veteran teams. That's challenging. So it's a question of people, but in every public broadcasting company, we have teams of passionate professionals. We have to shift with them. But I'm convinced we have a lot of things to bring better to the society and to the audience. So we have to change, and we will change, and we will succeed.
However, I'd like to add that that's definitely good news. However, somebody has to pay the bill. And when I come home, I'm confronted by severe cost cutting. Austrian Broadcasting Corporation did reduce for about 22% since 2007. That's 800 people. So there are a lot of obligation, a lot of risk and chances in transformation. But maybe it's about time to tell media policy and the politician that there's no free lunch. Yeah, we can't just take on obligations more and more and more in reference to democracy, and at the same time reduce. So that's a kind of suffocating moment affecting all BSM, especially the smaller public service media. So we should not forget that. However, for the very last minutes here, we've got another question. So finally, the online community is participating. That's good news. Hello to everybody.
Yeah, indeed, that's very good news. And this is another question actually referring to the new RTBF strategy. And it comes from our colleagues from the Lie Detectors Initiative. And they ask whether your new audience pillar should include media literacy activities. Is that something which is foreseen in your strategy? And maybe more generally, should that be something for public service media to pursue?
Obviously. I say always, if you have children and you live close to the sea, you have learned your children to swim. That means that media literacy, but also bring ecosystem with education, with culture system. It's crucial for us. But media literacy is one priority. Ethics in journalism, certainly the first one. And the third one is also to connect with ESG goals. The question about environment, about diversity, we have to commit and to demonstrate also our social commitment. So, but media literacy, certainly for the youngest and for the oldest, because there are needs in all part of the audience.
Another question. Thank you, online community, for listening to us and for participating. So we've just 1 minute left, so there's no space for more question and answers. So I'm inspiring all of you here in the room, in the conference room, but also those listen online, to take the lead in this debate. If public service media is really meant to be of public interest, so the public should be interested in it. So please participate. I'm not head or president of the EBU, but I kindly invite you to participate. So I think we need empowerment, we need a big vision, we need success in the future. So therefore, we desperately need also your ideas. So that's for now. Thank you very much for all the panelists. Thank you very much for listening to us. And I'm taking over to Annelies, wherever she is, in my back.
Right here, Klaus, right here. And thank you, Klaus, and your panelists. So a call to action to the public, but I also retain from your discussion, a call to authorities and political leaders: put the money where your mouth is. If you want a strong PSM, then invest in it and make sure that all these challenges that you're up to and ready to face can be realized. That's what I take, because PSM is full of passionate people wanting to do all kinds of interesting things to serve the audience.